Hello, everyone, and thanks again for tuning in to No Cabin Fever today. We have Matt Reiner from K15T with us, and he will tell us a little bit about boosting Confluence adoption in the remote edition. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Matt.
All right, thank you. Hi, everybody. I hope your day has been well. My name is Matt Reiner. I am a customer advocate at K15T. I used to be a Confluence administrator and a customer of K15T's, and then eventually I got to join the team. And one of the things that I got to struggle with as a Confluence administrator, and I'm sure you are feeling now as a very remote team, is the idea of boosting Confluence adoption. And let me know if this sounds familiar. So when your organization starts, it's a small team, probably everybody's in the same room, right? We're all there at our desks working, constantly collaborating. We know what the other person's doing because we can easily see what they're doing. We can hear from them. You probably don't need a stand-up meeting because you're maybe just standing right next to each other. Information is flowing really, really well. But then you grow, or everyone starts working remotely all of a sudden, and now we have the same needs. We still need to share information. We still need to collaborate on things. We still have the same organizational goals, but now we're separated. We're in different spaces, right? Or maybe the teams have grown, and now what used to be one person is now multiple teams or even multiple departments. So how do we still share information between all of these teams, not just within the teams? How do we keep the organization working together? And this is really the sweet spot that K15T cares a lot about. How do we enable collaboration and sharing across an entire company so that people can do what they love to do? So I'm sure you're thinking about it, right? There's got to be a tool that will enable us to do this. And I'm sure the one that comes to mind, since we're talking about Confluence, is email, right? Email's got to be the perfect tool. Put a bunch of info in an email, add 100 people, and you can just start collaborating on that content, right? Well, no, not exactly. It gets really messy. And if you're like me, you're probably trying to figure out how to get out of these email threads. And you're not alone. There's a lot of information on how to escape. So, okay, there's got to be a better tool for it. Email just wasn't built for this. So what about Word, right? Make a Word document, put all your content in there, format it just the way you want, and start emailing back and forth so that people can collaborate. But then you have situations where, we have an original version, and then we make a new version of it, and then I make a new version of that, but then the team makes a new version, so I have to update mine, and then we make a final version, but then we get it off to another team for review, and they make a final version, and then somebody makes revisions in design, and that could go on and on and on. Right? And this sounds a lot like working in 1999, and that's really kind of the case. This was cool collaboration, really powerful stuff then, but we're in 2020, we're all working remotely. How do we do this better? How do we get our teams together so we can work on something live over the internet? We've got Google Drive, right? We can use G Suite and Office 365, and we can all be looking at the same document. Everybody on the team, that's great, right? Well, not exactly, because when you set up one of these tools, you have to create what's called a team folder. And so you can share information in docs within the team, but you end up creating multiple team folders, which are silos that keeps teams from working together, which really causes a lot of issues. So for example, people get 121 emails a day. 49% of people have trouble finding information. People are spending 2.5 hours a day searching for information, and 33% of people are struggling with versioning. And everyone being remote all of a sudden hasn't made that any simpler. And that's because these tools are not built the way Confluence is. These are closed tools built for either creating content by yourself or creating content with just a team, whereas Confluence is built to be open to share information across the entire company, which is incredibly important in a time like this, right? So you might be thinking, yeah, Confluence is great. This is the perfect tool for our teams right now. We need this. But why did I just get another email with a Word document in it? Why are we not using Confluence? What's going on? And so the question is, how do we drive better adoption of Confluence? And at K15T, we have a lot of experience with Confluence. And so here are some tips that we've found that have made it successful across organizations. And the first is content, right? When people come to a space, they really don't want to see it empty. They've got questions. Where's our travel policy? What about our corporate design guidelines? Where do I find the answers to these questions? And if you work for a company like K15T or Atlassian, the answer is there's a Confluence page for it, right? So if I want to know where to go to lunch when we're back in the office, we've got a page for that. Or what do I do when my kids get sick? We've got a page for that. Or what about if I want to pass some information to the marketing team to write a public blog? We've got a page for that. And Atlassian does the same thing, right? Here's a page for the San Francisco office employees so they can figure out how to get a new badge or if they're allowed to bring their dog into work. Think about how much time is saved with pages like this, not having to track people down and ask these questions. But think of other wastes of time within our organizations. For example, short update meetings. Remember, a 15-minute update meeting with 4 people, that's actually an hour of company time. And then only 4 people out of everyone in the company actually know what's going on. We recommend replacing those meetings with Confluence pages. So maybe those 4 people spend the same amount of time updating the Confluence page, but then everyone across the entire organization can get those updates immediately. So take a look at your calendar and figure out what short status meetings can you eliminate and replace with a Confluence page. Also, think about the type of content you're asking people to start adding to Confluence, especially if they're new. Start with simple things like meeting notes, and then encourage people to expand to something a little bit more burdensome, something that would involve collaboration and using the editor, stuff like maybe a product roadmap. And then once people are getting comfortable with Confluence, then you can really ask, hey, let's get everything in here. Then bring in the big pieces of content like your employee handbook. And you can see how over time you're building trust in Confluence, which is important because people have been burned by tools in the past. The next important thing to focus on is news. So here's an example of a blog post from Atlassian founders introducing a new team member. You can see there's comments here, so people are asking and answering questions right here. Not only did they not take company time to introduce this new staff member, but there's so much more useful information, and the content's just getting better because there's a conversation around it. We also use Confluence blogs internally at K15T. So one of our teams that built Scroll Documents was able to rapidly prototype and build the app with feedback they got based on blog posts they wrote every week. Blog posts are great because they reach everyone, no matter where they are. It's always available at the right time. So if you have someone on the other side of the globe, they can read the news at 8 a.m. their time. And then, of course, you can have a full conversation around the content rather than it just being a lecture. And now we've certainly heard, reasons for not writing blog posts, and these are all legitimate, but we really believe that it's important. And so some techniques you can use to encourage more people to write blog posts and share are make sure people have enough time to share, especially if you're a leader. Hit that like button and comment and thank people for sharing information. Tell them how it helps you in your job. And then make sure people know it's not a scary thing. These aren't public. It's okay if they have typos or funny cat GIFs in them. That is okay. One of the ways we do this at Confluence is when you start on your first day or within your first week, you write an introductory blog post about yourself so that you can, first of all, tell people who you are, but then also you begin to realize, hey, I can share things in this company. I can be open and honest about my life and also my work. And Atlassians are doing this as well. They're getting married and sharing about it, and they're building sandboxes and sharing about it. We interacted with a company that the way they encouraged their employees to use the blog at first was they would bring in cake and they'd put it in a random meeting room on a random day. And they would only tell their employees using a blog post. So that was the only way to figure out where the cake was. And that was the way they encouraged employees to check the blog all the time because you never know when there's going to be cake. We also recommend tell your users to subscribe to all blog posts. You might think, oh, that's going to be so many blog posts. But really, it's kind of like a newspaper. You browse through all the blog posts and you find the ones that are useful to you. And then, of course, also keep an eye on the popular feed within your space. Next is structure. you may have seen a space just divulge into total chaos. People have created pages everywhere and no one knows what you're doing. And so you might think, maybe I should just make a new space, but think twice about that. Spaces are meant to be really permanent concepts based on maybe teams or structure within your company, maybe very large projects, whereas pages within those spaces can be very loosey-goosey, move them around easily. So for example, don't create a space for every project you have, create one space called projects, and then have top-level pages for each project with pages underneath those. Much easier to find the information. And then of course, pages can get out of hand, right? You might have a wall of text and nobody wants that. So then encourage people to break those up using headings and imagery, and also break them up into subpages when the content's getting too long. We find that there's some content that is very anchored in spaces, like your roadmap. It doesn't change much, it's very easy to organize, but then there's other pieces of content that just sort of float around. It's hard to know where to put these things. And for those, we have a couple of tips for keeping them orderly so people know where to find them. Maybe encourage people to draft things in their personal space, or maybe in a dedicated space for the whole team, and then move the content to a permanent space once it's ready. You could have a parent page within each space where people can put pages that they think maybe aren't valid anymore, and you can clean out that page every once in a while. Or just ask people to put the word draft in the name of the page when they're creating it. So if you find a 6-month-old page that says draft on it, you can just delete it. Finally, we looked at how we could use technology to help with this, and we really believe that the marketplace has a lot of great apps that help teams bridge that gap, especially if they're new to Confluence. We really wanted to look at, well, how can we make it easier for users familiar with like a Word environment to transition into Confluence? So there were some problems that we found were really difficult in Confluence, Word, and maybe both. And so we really wanted to figure out how could we make that an easier jump. And so we created our our Scroll Documents app, which is built for creating and organizing content as documents in Confluence. So for example, right, your team might be wanting to create an employee handbook. And so you have content all over a space or in multiple spaces that you need to bring together in one shareable employee handbook. So the way you can do that with Scroll Documents is you create your document, you add all of your pages of content in one space or from multiple spaces, and then bring them all together in one viewable document that you can share with whomever. And then we wanted people to be able to find those documents, right? So within each space, we have a documents overview area. And so here you can see the documents and browse through them, get more information. And then the versioning thing, right? We know how difficult this can be working with Word files. So you can create an initial version of your document, you can work on it, and then take a version snapshot and share that with everyone. And then you can continue to work on it and work on it and work on it. And of course, you can also restrict those, so you can make the older versions not visible or not editable. So here I'm going to create a new version of my document, and I can see the history over on the left-hand side, and I can compare what's changed over time. And then of course there's sharing, right? What if my team isn't all in Confluence? We're all still remote. How do I get them content out of Confluence? So of course you can share your documents to a Word or PDF file using our Word and PDF exporter apps. So here's an example of a branded PDF that we've exported that we can send over to new employees who are joining us remotely for the first time. So that's Scroll Documents. There's many other great apps out there that are great for making that jump. What I really wanted to finish up with is there's two phases that we find when it comes to bringing Confluence into the whole organization. The first phase is a push phase, where you and other people who really believe that Confluence is a great tool, you might have to push your colleagues and teammates to use it. No, don't send me an email. We're not going to collaborate that way. Go into Confluence. Let's do that. You might have to bring in a lot of cake. It is very hard and it can take a long time. But what we tend to see is people move into a second phase, a pull phase, where people are going into Confluence and looking for information and contributing information. And that's a really, really exciting time. That's when you know, hey, we're really using this. We've adopted Confluence across our organization. So those are our tips. I'm going to take a look here. I think I have a question. I have a question. Why is it called Scroll? The company, K15T, we started with the Scroll Exporter app, and the idea was kind of like the ancient monks of old. They were the original content creators and documentarians, right? They would maybe they were working with an ancient text and they would have to copy that over letter by letter, working on scrolls. And so we felt that was a good analogy, that people who are working with content in Confluence, it's still kind of the same thing. So it's a nod to that. In fact, our logo here is intended to sort of be the tops of 3 books. Again, referring to that documentation side of things. We're kind of content nerds a little bit at K15T. Any other questions?
Hey Matt, there was one more question in the Q&A box. You said you recommend creating one space for most projects, but how you keep hierarchies small, for example, for meeting notes to find them?
That's a great question. What we tend to do is we will, for example, meeting notes, if we have a meeting notes area, we will collect the meeting notes for an entire year, and then we will move them to another page that is our, our meeting notes from last year. And so we'll say meeting notes 2019, meeting notes 2018. You might even do that every month or every 6 months. Yeah, that's how we keep that clean. Another example might be if you do a lot of event planning. So you have an archive of past events. Yeah, good question.
Great. So well then, thank you very much for tuning in and contributing today, Matt. We will have an Easter special on Monday, contributed by the Atlassian community Berlin-Brandenburg, which is hosting Francis Martins from Excelate, who will talk about cross-company integration. And then No Cabin Fever today is back on Tuesday, with Justine Violante from BCom, and she will talk about how to view and use multiple Jira instances from one central driver seat. Thanks again for tuning in, and then enjoy the long and hopefully sunny weekend. Take care, bye-bye.